Welcome back. Max Nave Horsemanship again. And today I'm going to answer some questions that I have been asked. And it's a little out of season, but well, they're questions I keep getting asked, so I figure what the heck, we may as well talk about it now and get you ready for the winter, because the questions I'm going to be addressing are, do I need to blanket my horse? Do I need shelter for my horse? Do I need to take the horse in the barn and put it in a box stall for the night? Do I need to give my horse extra feeds for the winter so that it stays warm? I thought I'd do a video specifically on this, and like I said, it's going to incorporate a few subjects that talk about all these different things, and I'm going to share a story with you too that actually involves this little horsey here, true story, that can be a bit of a warning to you that things you should or should not do. Anyhow, start off, let's go in order. Let's start with blankets. Subject that just always ruffles feathers, but hey, this is my opinion. You can think what you want, do what you want. I can't make you do anything, but this is my opinion. And well, we've had horses since the beginning of time. Now, depending on your beliefs, that could be thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions to billions of years, I don't know, but a very long time. We've had horses since the beginning of time. That is an undisputed fact. Just how long that has been, well, people are going to disagree. However, when it comes to the subject of blanketing, nobody put blankets on horses. And in fact, the materials that, I don't know how far back blanketing goes. I don't think much more than maybe 100 years. And the materials that blankets are made out of these days are generally synthetics that have only existed for maybe 75 years, probably only been popular for about 50. So historically, blankets don't go back all that far, at least not the modern ones that we know of. And part of the thing I want to talk about too is the price. You know, I'm always looking at cheaper ways to do things because I see a lot of people spending money on horses that are just ridiculous. Blankets are a good example. I don't know what they cost because I don't own one, okay? Gives you an idea where I'm going to go with this, but they run anywhere from $200 to $500, somewhere in that price range. They generally get destroyed pretty quick, probably before even the end of the season, depending on the horse. I've seen them destroyed within weeks, and well, then you got to buy another one for the next season. So every year you're forking out another $200 to $500 for another blanket. If you think your horse needs to be blanketed, well, like I said, blankets are a relatively new thing historically. We've had horses since the beginning of time. They survived all that time without blankets. Do horses need blankets? Do you need to blanket your horse? The short answer is no. No, you don't. Horses don't need it. In fact, horses have far less trouble keeping warm than they do keeping cool. For those of you that, you know, this is going to focus primarily on a winter care of your horse. And depending on where you live, what you call winter can vary an awful lot. Where I happen to live, winter can be as much as -40. And it doesn't matter whether you're Celsius or Fahrenheit. At -40, it's the same, and it's cold. And then, of course, if you get a good wind on top of that, which we have a lot of around here, it gets even worse. And the horses don't care. Well, that'll kind of lead into my next topic, but we'll talk about blankets a little more, is some of the drawbacks of blankets. We think, well, blankets add an extra layer of insulation, but in fact what blankets do, and if you do research on blankets, I'm pre-warning you on this one, is you're going to have a hard time finding any good information because the vast majority of the articles, because I spent quite a bit of time looking up information on blankets, and the vast majority of the articles out there, probably at least 95%, are either written by the people that either make or the people that sell blankets. So they're all biased. They're going to tell you, yep, blanket's a great thing and you need one for your horse. Well, blankets actually, you think you're adding a layer of insulation to the horse? No, you're actually taking away one of their layers of insulation. Because what happens is, you know, she's fairly sleek. It's summertime right now, so there's a pretty thin coat. And in the wintertime, they get a lot fuzzier, and particularly on cold days, they'll get real fuzzy. But when you throw that blanket on, it compresses this coat. And for those of you that don't understand how insulation works, is it basically creates dead air space where the heat doesn't move because the air isn't moving. And the minute you put a blanket on top of that nice fluffy fuzzy coat, it compresses it, and there's no more dead air space, and their hair no longer insulates. They are now dependent entirely on the blanket. And in some cases, the horse might actually be colder with a blanket, because there's no man-made fabric out there in existence that can insulate as well as what nature provides. And this coat on a horse, fluffed up in the wintertime, well, I've seen an awful lot of horses endure the minus 40 temperatures without a problem. Well, so I don't think blankets are necessary at all. But if you insist on using one, I'm going to give you some advice on using one. And there's right and wrong ways to use one. Well, actually, the right way would be not use one at all, in my opinion. But if you insist on using one, there's a couple of things you really, 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 really need to adhere to. First off is you got to pay attention. You got to be checking on that horse regularly. You can't just put a blanket on and throw it out in the pasture and leave it there for a month and forget about it. No, you have to be checking on it every single day, because as blankets come loose, they shift, they turn, the straps get tangled in their legs, all kinds of things happen. And well, it goes beyond that too, because depending on when you put the blanket on, it can actually, if you put it on too soon in the fall, it actually inhibits the growth of the hair. And I've seen that, and I've read a few articles that say that, so I believe that's true. And so you don't want to be putting one on too soon. And almost every single case where a blanket is deemed necessary, it has something to do with human intervention that's actually causing that necessity. And that's one of the reasons I'm going to, I don't believe in it, because I don't like human intervention. In fact, in general, the less you do, the better off your horse is, because they really don't need humans. They've survived since the beginning of time without our help, and they don't really need it all that bad now either. As long as they get provided their basics, they're good. So anyhow, on the subject of blankets, you got to be watching them, and when to put one on. Well, of course, I don't agree with blankets in the first place, but depending on where you live, what you call winter and winter weather varies a lot. And I've seen people where it wasn't even below freezing yet, and they're putting blankets on horses. To me, that's just absurd. That's not even cool. Maybe to you. See, that's the mistake a lot of people make, is they figure because they are cold, the horse is cold. No, the horse is not cold. They're way tougher than we are, and they don't give a crap about the cold, okay? It doesn't bother them one little bit. Like I said, horses have less trouble keeping warm than they do keeping cool. Anyhow, so, you know, putting it on when the coat is damp, things like that, all you're doing is trapping the moisture in. You're going to make the horse colder. You're better off leave it alone. If you ever see a horse with a layer of snow on its back, snow is some of the best insulation there is. Ask the Eskimos that make igloos out of snow. Okay, they don't have much else to build with, but they aren't stupid. They know that you can build a shelter with a tiny little fire inside of it and all that snow around you, and you're going to stay warm. Why? Because snow is a great insulator. You don't need a blanket. In fact, that snow is going to probably keep that horse a heck of a lot warmer than the blanket will. But anyhow, part of the reason that I got this horse in here is because a little incident with a blanket. Now, like I said, I don't own one. But at some point, somebody did put a blanket on this horse. And I do believe it was partly because a lot of times people will convince you to do things to make them feel better about what they're doing. Now, they like to blanket their horses. I don't. And like I said, I don't even own one. And they knew that. And they knew I didn't blanket my horses. And they kept offering to put one on, and I was like, no, no, no. And one day, there was a bit of a storm. And, well, they did at least 3 things wrong. 3 big no-nos. First off, they messed with somebody else's horse, which is an absolute no-no. Don't ever mess with somebody else's horse. Leave it alone. You don't train it. You don't put blankets on it. You don't do nothing. You leave it alone, unless it's got like a major injury or something. You can take it into the barn, put it in a stall, and then contact the owner and let them know about the issue, and they can deal with it how they see fit. That's where your responsibility ends, and that's the least that you should, the most I should say, that you should be doing. Other than that, if it's somebody else's horse, leave it alone. So first thing they did was, because they wanted to feel better about blanketing their own horses during this blizzard. It was really quite mild, actually. It wasn't horrible by our standards around here. And so they had an extra blanket. They put one on this horse here. And, well, that was mistake number one. They're messing with somebody else's horse. Mistake number two was they waited until she already was covered with snow to put a blanket on. And I said earlier, all that does is trap the moisture in and then potentially can make the horse colder. That was mistake number two they made. Third mistake, because it was too cold for them, they wanted to get back in the house in a hurry. As soon as they got the blanket on, they took off back to the house. And this horse, as far as I know, has never had a blanket on her in her life. And she's, well, just about 25 years old now, somewhere around there. We don't know exactly, but never had a blanket on. And this is a few years back this happened, so she was a little younger then, but still never had a blanket in her life, as far as we know. And they never bothered to check and see how she was going to respond to a blanket. They just threw the blanket on and took off back into the house. Well, fortunately, they at least sent me an email saying that they had put a blanket on her. Well, I didn't live too far away from there, so I promptly hopped in my car and drove out there once I got the email. By the time I took a blanket off her, it had been a couple hours, and I was not impressed one little bit because, like I said, three mistakes. First, they're messing with somebody else's horse. Second, they put a blanket on while there was moisture on her, which doesn't help. And the third, they never bothered to check and see how the horse responded because it was a blizzard out. They wanted to get back in the house where it was warm. They didn't care about the horses that much. They like to pretend they did, but they didn't. And, well, when I got out there a couple hours after the fact, this little horse was standing frozen in one spot, and I don't mean frozen as in cold frozen. I mean, she'd never had a blanket on before. I mean, she tolerated them putting a blanket on, but once it was on, it was like she didn't know what to do, and she just froze in one spot and never moved. She was still standing in exactly the same spot that she was when they put the blanket on her. And had I not taken the blanket off promptly, this horse would probably be dead right now because lack of movement would have made her even colder yet. She wouldn't have eaten, she wouldn't have drank, she would have just stood there until she died. So, that's just the silliness that can take place with blankets, okay. So, my opinion on blankets is horses survive since the beginning of time without them. They don't need them. Should you blanket your horse? My answer to that is no. Now, when it comes to the subject of shelter, do you need to provide shelter for your horse? Well, that's a bit of a trick question because it depends on what is already existing on your property. If there's a significant number of trees, buildings, and things that the horse can use as a shelter, the answer to that would be no. If you happen to have a completely barren piece of land with not so much as a bush on it, then I would say, yeah, probably a good idea. But then that's partly me. I feel better if there's shelter for the horse, and I have witnessed times where, in fact, I have a picture of a bunch of horses standing around outside at -40. I got out of the car long enough to take a picture, decided it was too stinking cold, got back in the car where it was warm, and left. But at -40, they were standing outside about 75 feet away from a shelter that they could have been using, maybe 10 feet away from a bale they weren't even eating. They were just standing there, 40 below, and they were just hanging out. They didn't care. And and I've also seen horses can be very resourceful too. If there's so much as a bush or a building or a fence or a ditch or a hill or anything, they'll take advantage of those things as shelter. They're actually pretty smart animals. They know what is helpful. So, like I said, depending on the lay of your land, do you need shelter? Not terribly bad. Like I said, it all depends on your land. If it's barren or if you got any buildings or trees, I've seen where A number of horses would all huddle up beside the side of a building, or even beside a shelter. They wouldn't even go in the shelter, they just stand beside it, because it's actually somewhat unnatural for a horse to go inside of things because they're more vulnerable at that point. So instinct actually prevents them from doing it to a certain extent. But as long as there's, a tall fence made out of slats or something to break the wind, or a building, or trees or something like that, they'll do fine. They'll use that as shelter, and I've seen them do it many times, using various things as shelter. They just surprised me that I couldn't figure out why they were standing in a certain spot, and then I started figuring out, oh, they get shelter there. Okay, that's why they're there. So shelter, do you need shelter? Yes and no. Again, depends on your land, but I personally feel better if there is shelter. But I've also seen many times where the horses would not use it. They're actually far more inclined to use the shelter in the summertime, from my observations, because that gets them out of the sun. As I've said, they have more trouble keeping cool than they do keeping warm. So a shelter would get them out of the sun. And it also gives them relief from the bugs, because bugs are not as bad in the shade. So, okay, that's blankets and shelters, barns, box stalls. Oh, I hate those things. Okay, I think you're already getting my opinion. I've been asked many times, do you take them in at night, put them in the barn in the wintertime to get them out of the elements? No. Well, there's a couple reasons for that. One of them would be, well, sticking a horse in a box stall is kind of like putting a person in solitary confinement. It's considered to be a horrible punishment for humans. And if your horse is your friend, why would you do that to them? Not only that, but putting them in for the night, well, by the time you put the horse in, you go home, have a sleep, come back the next day, let the horse out. It could easily be 10 to 12 hours in between that horse has been in a stall. And you think, well, I'm doing them a favor, I'm putting them in shelter for the night so they can sleep there. Horses only sleep, as far as REM sleep, where they actually lay down. They probably only do that for maybe 2 hours out of a day. They take little naps while standing up. Laying down in a stall is not likely. Most of the time it's either too hard, or they don't want to lay in the feces and urine, so they won't lay down in the stall and get the proper sleep that they need. They'll do that later. So in fact, the horse is awake for the vast majority of the time that it's in that stall and bored out of its face, and the movement actually keeps it warm. If it's outside moving around, that's beneficial. It's good for their overall health, their digestive system, their circulation, and it keeps them warm. So do they need to be in a box stall for the night? No, absolutely not. That's probably the worst thing you can do. It's totally unnatural and totally unnecessary. It's a waste of your time, and the horses, you're not doing the horse any favor. They aren't going to like it now. So now, on to the last topic, supplements for the winter. And this is a common one, very common. And even those that haven't talked to me about it, I've seen it happen a lot, is people think that you need to supplement their feed in the wintertime to produce extra energy. Well, again, what you call winter, we might actually call a nice day around here. What you call winter, that can vary a lot. The temperatures, depending on where you live, because when you watch these YouTube videos, you could literally be anywhere in the world, it could vary a lot. And so in some cases where people call it winter, it's not even below freezing or barely below freezing. They absolutely do not need any help generating heat because they aren't even cold yet. Okay, and not only that, but studies have shown that the item that produces heat the best for a horse to keep it warm in the wintertime is just plain old hay. That's it. And when it comes to grains of various kinds, which even whether you give raw grains or feeds, most of them are got grains in them. And the horse's digestive system is not designed for grain of any kind. They are designed for leafy substances, grasses, weeds, leaves off the trees, which, by the way, I have seen them eat that too. They eat all kinds of things, and very rarely, unless they happen to come across a plant that happens to be in seed, they don't touch any seeds of any kind. That's not part of their diet, and their digestive system is not designed for it. So giving them a whole lot of extra supplements and feeds for the winter time to help keep them warm, it's not as beneficial for keeping them warm as just plain old hay. The extra calories are unnecessary and can actually lead to obesity which I've talked about in another video. It's almost epidemic in North America right now. There's obesity amongst horses. They don't need the extra calories. All it'll do is make them fat. And then you also, in addition to making them fat, that can contribute to their susceptibility to laminitis in the spring when they get on what we refer to as spring grass, which tends to be higher in sugars. And most places have spring grass of some kind that we try and keep the horses away from. But if you allow them to lose a little weight in the wintertime and not freak out about it, you know what? That spring grass doesn't bother them. So you not only save money on feed, but you don't have to worry about the laminitis problem in the spring by not stuffing them full of things in the winter. The only exception to that rule, and that doesn't necessarily apply to winter, it could be any time of year, is have your horse blood tested. Take the time and money to have a blood test done to determine exactly what the horse needs. Does it need any extra vitamins or minerals? Calories, probably not. Your vet will probably take one look at your horse and say, nope, your horse is fat. I haven't seen one yet where the vet has said the horse was underweight. The only one that we did have here that was underweight isn't anymore. She just wasn't being fed properly the last place she was at. And she's fine now. So, talk to your vet, and see what they suggest. And then you can buy some supplements that include vitamins and minerals that the horse actually needs with no extra calories. Those products are available and can make your life a whole lot easier and make your horse's life better. Because that's what I'm really all about is, doing what's right for the horse. So blanketing, my answer to that one, no, you don't need to blanket your horse. Shelters, well, that could be yes or no depending on the terrain and how windy it gets, how cold it gets. Do they even need a shelter? I mean, goodness. Horses, like I said, horses have existed for thousands of years using whatever was available for shelter. They're very resourceful. If there's anything at all, even some trees, they'll probably do just fine. Do you want to keep them in a box stall in the barn at night? No, definitely not. That's a no-no. That's very unhealthy for the horse. In fact, horses that are kept in box stalls and that sort of thing have far higher incidences of things like colic and various health issues that the horses that are out in pasture do not have. Okay, so keeping them on a box stall, no. And well, when it comes to extra supplements and feeds, again, no. So, well, I just saved you a whole pile of money, probably, well, like I said, blankets, I don't even know how much they cost, but probably easily $200 to $500. I know they're in that range somewhere. And of course, depending on brand and quality, could vary. I don't know what they go up to, what they peak at. And I have seen people that thought their horse needed extra feeds and supplements. You can easily fork out another $100 a month on that stuff. Keeping it in a box stall, that's just a lot of extra time and effort. And depending on where you're boarding, unless you're self-boarding, that may actually end up costing you more money as well. So in the long run, most of these things are going to save you money. Oh, and that shelter, if you want to put up a shelter, the kind that people typically have with the large wooden frame and tin sides and whatever that people usually use for shelters, those things are over $1,000 easy. So, and they can get wrecked in a hurry too by either the wind or the horses themselves. So, do you need any of that stuff? No. In most cases, not. The only one that on occasion is a good idea, maybe, is the shelter. And like I said, if you got really barren land that the horse is on, it wouldn't hurt to put up a shelter, but do they actually need one? Maybe not. But personally, I feel a little better if they got shelter. Whether or not to use it, that's up to them, but I sleep better if I know I've provided shelter for them. I've done my part. Other than that, what do horses really need? They need other horses, they need food, and they need water. That's it. And that's about the best life a horse can live. Leave it alone, don't interfere, don't try to help. Help usually causes problems because somebody knew what they were doing when they designed these animals, and they did a fine job. They don't need our intervention, they don't need our help. And most of the things that, if you think from a very logical standpoint, most of the products that we use on them, that we give to them, didn't even exist not all that long ago, and yet we've had horses since the beginning of time. So anyhow, just thought I'd answer a few questions that I get frequently asked, and I have heard somebody else talk about, even though, like I said, it's the middle of summer right now, and this happens to be today happens to be just a bit of a reprieve from the heat we've been having. You'll notice I actually got my hoodie on, and that's because it's actually kind of cool and raining today, which is really odd because the last few days it's been very close to 100 degrees here, and sunny, and yeah, it's been windy. Oh man. So today has actually been half decent, thankfully. So hope I helped you. I hope I answered a few of your questions that you've been asking without getting answers to, or you've been thinking about them but haven't actually asked anybody, whatever. Down in the comments below. Feel free to make a suggestion for a video, ask questions, make comments, argue with me if you want. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I leave the comments turned on all of my videos, so you, the viewers, are free to say whatever you want. And I don't take offense that easy. If I did, I'd turn off the comments if it mattered to me, but it doesn't. And in fact, I encourage comments. It gets you thinking. And sometimes some of the things that people say, I've had several really good comments that have been great suggestions for upcoming videos. Some of them are questions that, just were quick and easy to answer, and I did. If you got a question that you want answered, go ahead and ask. If it's a complex answer, I might do a whole video on it. And you'll get the privilege of knowing that my video was based on your question. So there you go, folks. Have a good day and go play with your horse.